As it turns out, like in animals, we too have internal feedback mechanisms that warn us about external stimuli. These occur a few seconds before future stimuli happen. For example, like in animals, we've seen numerous times that they are able to predict earthquakes even a few seconds before it happens. Seamlessly, they're also able to sense danger. They don't know what it is, but they just sense it. Now, it so happens that the exact same mechanism and feature is also existing within human body, within the biology of human body, and we are now able to scientifically measure it and prove it. The first studies that were ever published regarding this phenomena of humans also having an internal biofeedback mechanism that demonstrated their intuition was in the 70s. That's when researchers were able to detect small differences, small nuances in brainwaves activities prior to a future stimuli. In other words, a few seconds before something happened, whether it was perceived to be good or bad by the participants, there were differences in terms of the brain activities of these subjects. Then in the 90s, scientists were able to prove and detect this internal biological intuition phenomena in the heart of their subjects. And that was specifically in the heart rate variability of the subject. In other words, not just the heart rate, but the heart rate variability. The difference in between different heart rates and how much that differed between each two or a couple of heart. Further on in the early 2000s, scientists were able to detect the same internal intuition phenomena, biological phenomena within human beings, by using fMRI machines to look at the brain anatomy in itself, and they were able to determine that there were some nuance and different activities within the amygdala within the subjects before a future stimuli was happening. And at this point, we're able to combine both EEG and EKG, aka brain waves as well as heart rate variability, to prove and detect this biological intuitive phenomena within human beings by measuring those and by being able to detect specific nuances that happens a specific amount of seconds before a stimuli happen. And this we've been able to detect and prove in labs with human subjects. While the science for this field is still pretty young, it only started back in the 70s, and we do need a lot more data point. The beauty of this is that we are able, with advanced technology, detect these nuances, and the technology that we have today is becoming more and more sensitive, so they are able to really hone in on these very specific nuanced biological differences, biofeedback differences, as well as neurofeedback differences, to determine that this human being is feeling something and they are anticipating something. So in other words, the fact that animals are able to detect danger or things that are happening in the future a few seconds before, it's really not that big of a deal, because we humans have the same capacity and we are now able to measure it and prove it and make a use of it, because a lot of us have that, but we haven't learned to listen to it. And so, for example, an app such as Neuropatic app is designed to detect those, to make it a little bit easier for those of us who are still in trying to figure out what the intuition is saying, what is that gut feeling saying, to use this little piece of software instead. When it comes to biofeedback data as well as neurofeedback data, all we're doing is we are reading the electrical fluctuation, aka oscillations, of the human body or the human brain. There are two main characteristics in which we can use these oscillations. One of them is to determine, for example, a state of mind of somebody or a state of being of somebody. Let's say we want to calculate their heart rate, or EKG, aka, or their neural oscillation, EEG data. But there's also another camp that is less talked about, and it's way more scientific and more sort of future looking, and that is where we can read those oscillations that we're gathering from human biofeedback or neurofeedback and then make sense of them. In other words, they are communicating something to us. It's an information relay where these oscillations emanating from a human body mean something and they have an information for us. In the scientific world, you need to replicate a lot of these research studies before you can make a claim. However, in the studies that I found, there were enough evidence to kind of see that there is a pattern there. And the pattern was exactly what I just mentioned, not only through the biofeedback, but also neurofeedback. And so that's where my interest peaked, and I wanted to test to see whether we can actually create a product, a software that could read our intuition. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of times I feel like I feel my intuition, but sometimes I don't trust it. And so I make decisions that are not based necessarily on my intuition, then I come to regret it afterwards. And so for that reason, I felt like that would be really cool to create that. And so, but when it comes to neurofeedback, while we have some studies that showed that you could also from neurooscillation understand human intuition, because the devices are not used, commonly used in the society, it's much easier to use the biofeedback data. For example, we have devices that could easily calculate the heart rate or heart rate variability. We could even put our index finger on the camera lens of an iPhone or an Android and calculate that, or if you have an Apple Watch or Fitbit, etc. And so that is how it all started. And the next challenge was to actually write the algorithm, because there are a lot of information about what happens to the heart rate and heart rate variability and neural oscillation for us to say that, okay, this is the intuition speaking. And also there was a component of time that was involved. And so the algorithm for the software app ended up having a few components into it. One of them was time, the component of time. How long in advance do we collect the biofeedback? Another component is the value of the biofeedback. What value do we give it? And what do those values mean? How do we compare them? And within the time frame that I just mentioned, we needed to have the biofeedback for that, but also we needed to have a biofeedback that is calibrated for the person, because different individuals have different biofeedback calibration. And so there was a lot of testing there that had to be done for it to work. And once we tested it and launched it, and believe me, I tested it a lot, it appeared to be working. And so the idea with this software app is, both for iPhone and Android, is that whether you have a biofeedback device such as Apple Watch or Fitbit, it doesn't matter. You don't need those devices. You can literally use your index finger and just making sure that you keep it there all the time, so that we can read your biofeedback from your index finger, from your iPhone or Android app. And that algorithm ended up having a sweet spot that ended up working with the biofeedback of the person that reads the intuition right before we need to make a decision. So what I love for you to do is to try it and let me know if you love it or hate it, or if it was easy to use, easy to understand, not easy to use, hard to understand, any type of confusion, anything that might happen. I'm gonna at the name of the app below. And more importantly, I'm interested in whether you feel like an application as such is useful to you, where you have access now to an app, a software app that can literally read your intuition based on science, read your biofeedback data, and let you know what your intuition say. Because a lot of us have that, we have that gut feeling, but we don't always listen to it necessarily. And sometimes we just need to have like an oomph or like a push to let us know that, hey, you are actually correct with feeling that way. And it could be a small decision that you need to make or a big choice that you need to make in life. Definitely doesn't matter, because intuition is intuition, and because scientifically we have evidence that our biofeedback and neurofeedback tell us that there is something at odd. If it is, then an app like this would be able to help us to kind of make that, help us ease into making those choices and making those decisions in life. That's all I have for today. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.